Typically, if you're doing an in-person interview and you're on a group setting, it's a lot easier to read social cues. You know when to talk, you're listening to somebody else, you're able to make eye contact. But in a virtual platform, it's a lot harder to tell who's going to talk next, if you should talk, if you should unmute. You're not really looking at anybody because you're looking at a camera screen, and so it's not like you're looking eye to eye to somebody. And so it's a lot harder to figure out some of the social cues on a virtual platform. But one of the things that I've encouraged students to do, and I've also heard a lot of students doing this as well, What is going on, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpong. This is Phil's Guide to PsyD. This channel is dedicated to all things psychology, wellness, and graduate school. Today, we're going to be talking about how to become successful as you're going through your clinical psychology interviews, but specifically your virtual interviews. What has changed years ago in terms of having in-person clinical psychology interviews to now there's a lot of programs that are really actually doing permanent clinical psychology virtual interviews. And so there's a lot of different pros, but there are some interesting things that you might have to take away in terms of helping yourself to be successful in a virtual interview. And so we're going to talk about 4 things that I'm going to give you guys, just some things to think about as you go through your clinical psychology interview. Now, for the first thing, even though your interview is virtual, it does not mean that you should dress any less professional than you normally would for an in-person interview. And so it's really important to still dress your best, look fantastic, even when you are on screen on camera. The second thing is lighting. If there's any way that you can have your interview by a window where there's some lighting coming through, that will also be helpful. If you can be mindful of the background, I know there's some different things that you can do on Zoom to kind of blur out your background, so you could also do that as well. But you do want to look presentable, you do want to look good, you want to make sure that you are giving the committee some examples of how you are being intentional about this interview. And with that, if you need to, try and test out the internet connection as much as you can. The third thing is that it might be tempting to have your camera off during different parts of the interview. Now, typically for clinical psychology interviews, they're anywhere from 6 to 8 hours long throughout the day. If they're doing virtual, it might be 4 to 6 hours, but that is still a long time to have your camera on. And I understand there might be some temptation to turn your camera off, especially if you're talking to just some students or you are just waiting in a waiting room or whatever it is. But I would encourage you to have your cameras on throughout the duration of the interview. I think it's really important to be able to show yourself in terms of who you really are, especially during that interview process. Now, the fourth thing is that you might get into a situation where you are doing group interviews with other people, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Typically, if you're doing an in-person interview and you're on a group setting, it's a lot easier to read social cues. You know when to talk, you're listening to somebody else, you're able to make eye contact. But in a virtual platform, it's a lot harder to tell who's going to talk next, if you should talk, if you should unmute. You're not really looking at anybody because you're looking at a camera screen, and so it's not like you're looking eye to eye to somebody. And so it's a lot harder to figure out some of the social cues on a virtual platform. But one of the things that I've encouraged students to do, and I've also heard a lot of students doing this as well, is to really try and be yourself just as much as you are yourself in person. Try and be yourself, especially in a clinical psychology virtual interview. And so if you are normally talkative, it's okay to be talkative as well, to be able to show who you are to the committee. And I think the trick in terms of figuring out, the group dynamics of when to talk, when not to talk, it's always a balance, right? Because you don't want to appear as if you're dominating the conversation, but you also don't want to be in the rear end and be forgetful in your interviews. And so what I've always encouraged people to do is that when you do talk, try and make it intentional, whether it's asking a question or telling a story or talking about who you are. Try and leave a memorable mark. Try and make sure that your statements that you are saying, if you do speak, is within good intention and you're being thoughtful about what things you are saying. And also, I think what's great too is that if you feel like you're dominating the conversations towards the beginning, if you want to be a little bit more quiet towards the end to give other people an opportunity to also talk as well, you want to come across as a nice person no matter what. And so it's really good to be respectful and be mindful of how other people are also going to respond if you're dominating the conversation, and be mindful of where you can give and where you can take and where you can also relax and chill and kind of observe as well. So those are just a few tips to give you guys, especially as you're preparing for your virtual interview. I know that it will go well. I know you guys will do fantastic. And if you have any other questions, please put it down in the comment section below. If you have not already, please like and subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next video.